Welcome to Withdraw Consent. This is going to be part 2 of our Malcom X presentation. If you missed part 1, pause this video, go check it out. It was posted yesterday. Watch that video so you know, have good context of who Malcom X is going into this video, and enjoy it.
Now we're kind of entering the third phase. It's not clear exactly when the break is finalized, but he gets a minister. He hears down the grapevine that a minister has said it would be better if Malcom X was dead. And the only way you're allowed to talk like that if Elijah Muhammad has ordered it. And so, like, we're going to see a guy's going to come to him. And the guy's going to say, Malcom X, I was ordered to plant explosives in your car so that when you turn the ignition, it explodes. He said, I know you and I know your service to the Nation of Islam. I refuse to do it. And Malcom X says, thank you for my life. Here's what's actually happened. And so he tells them what actually happened, not what they're being told. And the guy says, I believe you, because it's Malcom X. He's not, this guy's just, what you see is what you get. And what he gets a lot. And so he says, I will go back and I will tell individuals just one-on-one who also might become ordered to kill you what's happening, so that hopefully I can plant enough of a seed that they won't kill you. So he basically tries to extricate himself from the Nation of Islam by saying he's no longer with them, but he also has no ill will towards them. Sure. And it's still great because he's trying not to get killed, and it's not going to work. But it's very interesting. Now we're in the third part, and this is the most interesting part. So I'm going to tell you about the 2 organizations that he founded, okay? The first one, less important, I'll say. He founded this organization called the Muslim Mosque Inc., March 12, 1964, 4 days after his official exit from Nation of Islam. And it started out with 50 members. It grew to 125. We're going to see that his views evolve rapidly during this period, so it's hard to hold this together because it's kind of like for Nation of Islam dropouts. But the problem is his views at this point, he developed so rapidly because now he's not confined to the thinking of Elijah Muhammad. He was a parrot before. And even when they started cutting him out of the paper a couple years before he ended up exiting, he stopped saying Elijah Muhammad said, because he's not teaching, he's not going to the college campus and advocating Islam. He's advocating social issues for black people. Because the guy is completely devoted to black people. At one point in his book, he said, every single action he takes, every single part of the day has to be to better myself or to better my people so that I can better help my people. Everything is focused on how can he fix things for black people. He's incredibly single-minded. And so now this Muslim Mosque Inc. is going to get recognized by Orthodox Islam.
Oh, interesting.
Even being this small. It's also going to fall apart right after his assassination. So this was March 12, 1964, and he's going to die February 21st, 1965. So he's going to be assassinated 13 and a half. No, that's not right. 12 and a half months.
Okay.
Ish. Okay. No, 11 and a half, whatever. 11 and a quarter. Okay, whatever. Doesn't matter. So now we're going to talk about this other thing that he founded, and this is really interesting, okay? So, no, first let me tell you a story. So he's got to go to Mecca after this. It's also to get out of the U.S. So he tells Ella was in the Nation of Islam with him. Took her 5 years to join after he became a minister, but then she exited. She was a strong-willed black woman. She's not doing what she's told. But now she's still a Muslim, and she's saving up for money for Mecca. And he says, I need to go to Mecca. Now, Malcom X doesn't ever have any money at any point. The one reason his wife almost left him at one point, because their only argument was, Malcolm, you need to save money. And he said, no, I don't. Nation of Islam will always take care of us. And he said that was one of the biggest mistakes he ever made. She did not leave him, because she just supported him no matter what. Wonderful woman, never remarried, nothing, you know? So he goes to Mecca. Ella says, hey, just take my money that I've been saving for myself to go to Mecca, and you go to Mecca. And so he goes over there, and it's just this wild story where he gets hooked up with this party, and everything's going to be good, but nobody from America is allowed to go to get a passport to Mecca. That's not a thing, because there's no Muslims over here. Why would he be allowed to go? And so when he first wanted to go, he went to this professor of Islam, and he said, hey, I want to go to Mecca. And the professor says, that's funny that you just showed up today, because also that just showed up today is a book from a prominent Egyptian author with an invitation for you, his phone number of his son, and the phone number of the Prince of Arabia's son, because it's not Saudi Arabia at the time. It's
Okay.
just Arabia, and that's where Mecca's at. So he gives him the whole thing, and he's like, it's the will of Allah. So he goes, and he gets trapped over there in the airport because they won't, and he can't speak Arabic, so he doesn't know the language. Eventually, he remembers to call the phone number, and he calls the phone number, and these people immediately swoop over there. And the guards are so happy they get to meet these famous people who are going to get the American Muslim. And half the people in the airport think he's Muhammad Ali because he doesn't know a lot of words. So he said Cassius Clay, and they're like, Cassius? And he's like, no. Anyways, so, but the guy who picks him up is white.
Okay.
And I don't know if this is the, I forget if this is the Prince of Arabia or the son of the author, but it's a white person, and takes him to his hotel in this beautiful palace. And then he's like, thanks for having me over. He's like, no, you're staying here. I'm going to spend the night on my father's sofa so you can have the palatial hotel. And he's like, no, you can't do that. You can't do it. He's like, no, we're brothers in Islam. And Malcolm X is just reeling. This is a white man telling him this, right? And so when he ends up rethinking all of his thoughts about white men being the devil.
Okay.
Because it's not white men. Because once you get into the Islamic community and they're at the Hajj and there's black people, white people, brown people, blue-eyed, blonde hair, black hair, brown, it doesn't matter. And everybody's just wearing the same outfit as each other, and they're sleeping next to each other 10 to 12 to a mat. They're eating out by their hand out of the same bowl, which at first he couldn't do as an American. But now he's doing it because he realizes his brotherhood, and it doesn't matter about your race at all if you're in the Islamic world. And so he ends up flying around, and everybody wants to talk to him. The leader of Guyana, the leader of this country, the leader of that country, and they're all accepting him, and he's speaking to their crowds. And he realizes that it's great living in Africa, and it's terrible living in the United States. And right at the time, Africa is trying to unite into a single Africa, a coalition, an EU, we'll say, of Africa. And he dreams of uniting the 22 million Afro-Americans. He even says the word Negro over there, and they say, "Oh, stop. We don't say that about your people. We say Afro-Americans," and not African-Americans. They say Afro-Americans. That's how they speak in Africa about American black people, who he calls American Negroes, and they call Afro-Americans. They say that's derogatory. Don't do that. Which is funny, them schooling him.
Sure.
Because he's so accustomed to hearing that in his mind, and he doesn't even know. So there's 22 million Afro-Americans in the United States at that time. There's 41.6 million now, just as an interesting fact. And so there's this organization, and it's called the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, a coalition of 53 African nations working to provide a unified political voice for the continent. Imagine America hates this idea. You gotta crush those Africans if you're American. Terrible. But I imagine that there's so much interesting in here. And so what the other organization Malcolm X made was the OAAU.
Okay.
So the first one is Organization of African Unity. This is an American organization called Organization of Afro-American Unity.
Okay.
So he wants the OAAU to unify the 22 million Afro-Americans to support the coalition in Africa. And so now what Malcolm X wants is he wants the solution where African Americans are given states.
Okay.
Just completely get their own independent country. And one of his primary things is about integration over segregation.
Okay.
Integration ends up with assimilation, which means the absolute death and destruction of his people for all times.
Totally.
He doesn't want any type of integration. Think about that. If you're a diversity person or an integrationist, or think about that. If you want just black people, just integrate. You want to destroy their culture, their history, he doesn't want to. His name is Malcolm X because he gave up his last name, which was Malcolm Little, which was the white rapist name of his grandmother, and said, none of my descendants will ever know what their true last name is. All of my descendants from here forever will now have the last name X, so they'll always remember. Integrate. Just integrate, Malcolm Little. No. Okay. So in the coalition spirit of the OAU, Malcolm X sought to reconnect African Americans with their African heritage, establish economic independence, and promote African American self-determination. He also, so he has a basic unity program. I don't know if you're interested in hearing this. I think it's a little too much because we're going long. What if I just told you what the 5 topics were?
Sure.
Okay. So I have quotes on each, but we're not going to do it. It's going to be about restoration, reorientation, education, economic security, and self-defense.
Okay.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But if you just heard the quotes, you'd be like, yeah, cool to all that. Okay. Along the more controversial positions taken by the OAAU, this is Malcolm's organization, was the suggestion that leaders of African states held more legitimate political power for African Americans than did the American government.
Interesting. Okay.
It's interesting because you're like a hostage.
Right.
And then the hostage taker is saying, no, I have complete control over you don't have any self-determination. And it's like, the leaders of my people, I kind of care what they say in Africa better. No monetary donations from non-African sources.
Oh, that's great. Good
This
for
is
them.
great.
Yeah.
Now let me tell you a story about what the white money does for the black people. Okay? 20 years in the black community, they thought, Million Man March. Maybe Million Man March. All of a sudden, it started to happen. It was wild what happened. There were just Negroes on buses, Negroes hitchhiking. All these people were showing up in Washington, and D.C. said, this is terrible. No, go home. Everybody go home. So they had a meeting with the 6 civil rights leaders of the black community. And they said, hey, you know what's a really good idea? After these people go home, a Million Man March. We'll fund it. We'll give you half now, half after it's peacefully done and everybody goes home. We'll give you the money. We'll tell you where to set up first aid stations. We'll tell you where to make the Negroes march. You know what I'm saying? Co-opted it. So the Million Man March that you know of wasn't the one that could have been effective. It was the one by the 6 civil rights leaders that were co-opted with the white money. And Malcolm X says, you take the white person's money, you serve the white person. And then he looked at the Million Man March with Martin Luther King Jr. and he said, I don't know why he phrased it this way, but he said, when you see white legs swinging next to black legs, I guess they're sitting on something and dangling their legs, it's impossible the revolutionary spirit can allow the oppressor and the oppressed to sit side by side. See, the first Million March was the revolutionary spirit. It was wildness. This was absolute control of a population.
Sure.
This was not what Malcolm X wanted. This is what Martin Luther King Jr. wanted, who's trash. He's just trash, right?
Okay.
See, this guy, Patrick Bet David does this thing. Are you a true believer or not? That's what he wants to know out of the interview. I'm a true believer in what I believe in, which is something different than this, but I appreciate this. Malcolm X was a true believer. Elijah Muhammad was not. Martin Luther King Jr. was not. Unfortunately, Malcolm X spent all that time following Elijah Muhammad, which he could have done so much better elsewhere. So what I'm trying to say here with this part, and I think this is the most important part, is this project that he was going to be doing was going to change the entire world, this OAAU. Mm-hmm. It was going to change the entire world. He could have convinced the black people in this country of something radical, and they could have got their states if he could get them divorced from the civil rights leaders. See, the civil rights leaders are integrationists.
Right. Oh, yeah, 100%.
See, civil rights was not what Malcolm X wanted. He did want human rights for black people. He didn't want the dogs to be put on them, the water hoses, the beatings. He didn't want them to be excluded from places. But he didn't want them fully integrated and to act like white people. And the people that he was among were such proud black people, behaving in such moral way, with such education, and he wanted that. And so my point here is that this OAAU could have changed the world, and it fell apart after he died. He had said that leaders of the black community in the United States just need to travel the world, because you don't understand how bad it is in the United States until you just go somewhere else and you're treated with respect. They were in Germany, in Frankfurt on a layover, and they were going, him and a black dude, and they were going around to different shops. Everybody was treating him so nice. They were like, I think they should be treating us worse than this. Let's start telling people we're Muslims. So they go into this shop, and there's this older white guy, and they're like, oh, black people, come on in. And he's like, no, we're black Muslims, they say. Well, they don't use that term, but we're Muslims who are black. They hate black Muslims. They hate that term. Oh. Because they're black people who are Muslims. Oh, don't say black Muslim. And then the shopkeeper says, oh, you're black Muslims. And he's like, he points to the Germans walking by and he says, it is one way today, but it will be another way tomorrow. And then the guy with him whispers to him and says, he means the Germans are going to rise again. You know what I'm saying? Because this guy's like, oh, you guys are out there? I've got a room with some memorabilia in the back.
Gotcha.
Pretty funny. So
that story kind of reminds me of the Jesse Owens thing. Like how the only place he felt like it wasn't racist was when he was in Germany in the 30s.
Right. And then the downed pilot. It's similar where he went back and then they said N-words this side, and it's the same type of thing. So what do you think about this? Look, I got some more I want to tell you about his assassination and how that happened, but what do you think about the evolution of ideology here? And
it's interesting. It's like you said, I don't feel like there's a lot. If I was a black person, I would think, oh, this guy is actually out for my own good and for my people's good and that type of thing. It isn't like you're saying, when the government gives $1 billion to Chicago to help the ghetto and nothing happens. The money's just sucked up. You know what I mean? That's the oppressor is doing that to them.
Right.
And they have no chance.
Right. Yeah. I think we don't judge people when they were hustler. We judge you for what you become. So forget the first part of his life.
Yeah, definitely.
The second part of life, he wasn't the good guy during the Nation of Islam part. Let me tell you a story. He was in a place in Harlem, I believe, and it's black part of town. And this white girl walks in. She's got a thick Southern accent. She flew up here. And she wants to ask Malcolm X, what can I do to try to fix things? And he says, I'm sorry to tell you, but there's absolutely nothing you can do to fix things. And she's like, in tears, she just goes and gets her flight back. That was during the Nation of Islam time. In the after period, he rethinks about that story. And he says, man, I wish I could find that girl again to tell her that I was wrong before. Because he was wrong. He said, when I said all white people are the devil, it's just like saying all black people are fill in the blank.
Right.
Unintelligent monkeys, like whatever you want to say.
Sure.
It's just as unintelligent as that. And that there are ways that white people who are Muslims can help, who are not Muslims. There's separation. There's all types of steps that people can take. And I think in the third period, in the final period of his life, he was becoming the hero for his people. He was becoming the hero that they needed.
And he was understanding what they needed. And,
right.
Yeah.
And I think in the end, I would put Malcolm X in the 5 stars out of 5 stars.
Okay, wow.
Hero. Now, he didn't complete his evolution. He was still every day working on it, but he was almost there. And he's the kind of guy who will figure out solutions. He can. Yeah. And he's got the notoriety to and the connections in Africa and the connection to the Middle East, connection to the Islamic world. And he could make magical things happen that no other American could. Because we're talking about black Americans, Afro-Americans at this part. Nobody else could. Martin Luther King Jr. can't. He gets you more integrated. That's what he could do for you.
Right.
If you want that, then you've got Martin Luther King Jr. streets in every city. How many Malcolm X streets do you got?
That's true.
I don't know the answer. I've never seen one in my life. So I just want to talk briefly about his death.
Okay.
So March 8th, 1964 is the official date he was expelled, but it's not that clear. And so that's funny because he was expelled officially in March 8th, 1964, but in February 1964, leader of Temple Number 7, Harlem, his old temple, New York, ordered the bombing of Malcolm X's car. We talked about that. So they ordered the bombing of the car the month before he got officially expelled. Oh. Because remember, he heard stuff about it even when...
yeah.
Okay. March 1964, Elijah Muhammad told Boston minister Louis X, that's Louis Farrakhan, current leader of Nation of Islam, quote, hypocrites like Malcolm should have their heads cut off. That's March 1964, the same month he was expelled. April 10th edition of Muhammad Speaks, the paper I told you about, featured a cartoon depicting Malcolm X's bouncing severed head. On June 8th, FBI surveillance recorded a telephone call in which Betty Shabazz, his wife, and Malcolm X's wife, was told that her husband was, quote, as good as dead. 4 days later, an FBI informant received a tip that, quote, Malcolm X is going to be bumped off. That same month, the nation sued to reclaim Malcolm X's residence in East Elmhurst, Queens, New York. His family was ordered to vacate, but on February 14, 1965, the night before a hearing on postponing the eviction, the house was destroyed by fire. And he's doing all this stuff in spite of this. On July 9th, Muhammad Aid John Ali, in parentheses, suspected of being an undercover FBI agent, referred to Malcolm X by saying, quote, anyone who opposes the Honorable Elijah Muhammad puts their life in jeopardy. In the December 4th issue of Muhammad Speaks, Louis X, or Louis Farrakhan, wrote that, quote, such a man as Malcolm is worthy of death. The September 1964 issue of Ebony magazine dramatized Malcolm X's defiance of these threats by publishing a photograph of him holding an M1 carbine while peering out of a window. I'll put that on the screen for you, that image that was from Ebony. And then his assassination is not interesting at all. It's so sad. He was at a speech, and he's got security all around him. Some black dudes make a scuffle over here. The security turns that way. One guy pulls out a shotgun. One guy pulls out a handgun. Bang, bang, bang. His pregnant wife, pregnant with twins, is standing right there. He goes down. The crowd grabs the guy who had the pistol. They're beating him to death, but some people pull him off of him. They find the guys. They're Nation of Islam guys, 20, 21 years old, just completely believe this Elijah Muhammad stuff. One of the guys who did it, I think his name is Thomas Hagen, and he went to prison for 20 years. And then they asked him after, and they're like, and he just said, I'm just so sorry. He says, I so regret what I did. Because they got some 20-year-old to go destroy the flower of black America.
Yeah.
The great black hope here. I mean, I'm not being joking. I'm serious. And it's just like being a great man and you get hit by a car. Yeah. It's just pathetic. But it's your own people, though. It's your own people. Right. It's tragic. I hate it. So I want to go through some quotes real fast. Okay. I got about 7 quotes. I'm going to put infographics on the screen or whatever you call them, little meme things. Sure. I don't know what they are, so you can read along. And we're just going to discuss them deep, see what you think. You can tell which ones are from the Elijah Muhammad time and which ones are from the post-Elijah Muhammad time. Quote, a race of people is like an individual man. Until it uses its own talent, takes pride in its own history, expresses its own culture, affirms its own selfhood, it can never fulfill itself.
Wonderful.
Beautiful.
That's great.
If you're not ready to die for it, put the word freedom out of your vocabulary. Wow. I know we have different thoughts on freedom, but I feel like I get the idea that he was going for. Quote, I believe that there will ultimately be a clash between the oppressed and those who do the oppressing. I believe that there will be a clash between those who want freedom, justice, and equality for everyone and those who want to continue the systems of exploitation. I believe that there will be that kind of clash, but I don't think it will be based on the color of the skin. That's after, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah, because it's not black and white, it's oppressed and is interesting.
I enjoyed his autobiography so much, but he kept saying the word exploitation. And it's funny, I realized that I have a psychological aversion to the word exploitation because it's kind of communist jargon. Oh. It's just commonplace communist jargon. And I thought, boy, I'm inhibiting myself so much because exploitation is a beautiful word. How exploitative is the United States society? It's incredibly exploitative. Okay, so here's another quote. I am not a racist. I am against every form of racism and segregation, every form of discrimination. I believe in human beings and that all human beings should be respected as such, regardless of their color. Well, I feel like a man who has been asleep somewhat and under someone else's control. I feel that what I'm thinking and saying is now for myself. Before it was formed by the guidance of Elijah Muhammad. Now I think with my own mind, sir.
So it's interesting he's putting that in his perspective of the Elijah Muhammad, but that you could apply that to people who are asleep from the system, brainwashing and that type of thing.
Because he just escaped a narrative. Right. It doesn't matter what narrative you're escaping. Yeah. Wow, but I like that. And just to be able to say, now I think with my own mind.
Right. And that's how I feel. I feel like I've never actually thought before. I've just been repeating the stuff I've been taught.
It's like when you rewatch a movie.
Yeah.
Like Sound of Music.
Right.
You rewatch The Sound of Music and you realize, oh, the main character is the bad guy. Right. He's the guy betraying Austria. The will of the Austrian peoples to go with the Nazis. Anyways, quote, I shall never rest until I have undone the harm I did to so many well-meaning, innocent Negroes, and through my own evangelistic zeal, now believe in him even more fanatically and more blindly than I did. Dang, that's sad.
Yeah, very.
That's sad. Okay, last quote of the day. Quote, it is a time for martyrs now, and if I am to be one, it will be for the cause of brotherhood. That's the only thing that can save this country. He said that February 19th, 1965, 2 days before he was murdered by Nation of Islam followers. Yeah. So when you get to the end of the autobiography, he says, "I know that this autobiography will not be published by the time I'm dead." And it was not. It was published 8 months later. And he says, "Here's what, when I'm dead, here's what they're going to tell you to think about me." And then he describes it. "Here's what I want you to think about me, and here's what truly you should think about me, in my opinion." He describes it. And then he says, "For all of the good things I have done in my life," he says, "I thank Allah, who has made every single one of them happen. And for every single mistake that I've made in my life, that is me alone that did that."
Interesting.
And then that's it, you know?
Wow.
I think it's a pretty amazing story.
Yeah. Yeah, very.
I think I want to slap anybody in the face who wears a Malcolm X shirt, unless you know.
Right.
I think that they mainstream this as silly. Now, if you're a black person and you know when you're wearing that shirt, you're going to punch me back.
Cool.
Wear the shirt then. Good for you. Right?
Right. But I was never taught any of this in school or.
If I was black, I would be a black nationalist and I would wear a Malcolm X shirt every day of my life.
Right.
Just to curiosity. Hey, cool shirt. Okay, do you know what he taught? Step over here, young man. Young black man. Step over here. I got some things to tell you. You want to hear what Malcolm X is about? Anyways. So what do you think?
Wonderful.
He's not a villain. He's just not a villain in the end. I'm just going to say.
Right. Yeah.
They tried to phrase him as like this hateful person who did all these things, but he didn't do that. He had hateful rhetoric against white people.
Right.
But he did overcome that.
Right. That was part of his path.
And he ultimately only said those hateful things because he so loved his black people and he didn't want them to continue to be exploited and injured and
by whatever portion of white people were perpetrating it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then it was a high proportion. It's 90-something percent are perpetrating it. Because just the one who scowls at you as you walk through their neighborhood.
Right.
It's still the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. But I guess in my mind, he didn't want white people in their neighborhoods either. Like if he could have his way.
If he could have his way. Right.
So yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I'm a fan. Very good presentation.
Okay, cool.
So like I said, going into this, I hardly knew anything. That was eye-opening. Very cool. Hopefully you guys learned something too. Some great quotes. If you've got nothing else, just some of those quotes are amazing. Leave us your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you have to say, positive or negative. And hopefully you're enjoying this villain series, and we'll catch you at the next one.